Proverbs. We want to look at the author of Proverbs, Solomon, at least for most of the Proverbs. I think it's helpful to examine the author when you study a book, and we're going to do that with Solomon. His biography is in 1 Kings 3 through 11 in the book of 1 Kings. So these two books are about the decline of the kingdom, 1st and 2nd Kings. The kingdom is united in chapters 1 through 11. There's an inclusio, this repetition of a thought. So sometimes they're called bookends, that marks the beginning and the end of a very important section. And in 1 Kings 3:3, the author said, Solomon loved the Lord and his wife. And this is when Solomon writes the Song of Solomon in his life. That is, when he writes to the wife of his choice, as he calls her, the Shulamite woman. And he writes the Song of Solomon. But then the closing of the inclusio is in chapter 11, verse 1. Solomon loved many foreign women. So you see that bracket that tells us that in this 40-year span, Solomon began loving the Lord and his wife. He ended by loving many foreign women. Issues not that they were foreign, but that they brought their foreign gods into the marriage, into the kingdom of Israel. And that's when the kingdom fell. You have the rise of Solomon in 1 Kings 3 through 8, the decline of Solomon in chapters 9 through 11. That leads to the divided kingdom, which divided in 931 BC. The result was the captive kingdom, recorded in 2 Kings. That is, the Assyrians came and took Israel captive. That's recorded in 2 Kings 1 through 17. That happened in 722 BC. And then the Babylonians came and took Judah captive in chapters 18 to 25. It happened in 586 BC. We see Solomon's reign and his life with this background, the decline of the kingdom. Solomon illustrates Proverbs 16:18. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. He illustrates the words of Jesus, which is very similar. Whosoever shall exalt himself shall be abased, shall be humbled, and whosoever shall humble himself shall be exalted. Jesus said that in Matthew 23:12. Solomon was humble the first 20 years of his reign in 1 Kings 3 through 8. But then he became proud and was proud the last 20 years of his reign, 1 Kings 9 through 11. So we see his humility in chapter 3 when the Lord comes to him and says, ask what you want, and I'll give it to you. And Solomon did not ask for wealth. He did not ask for fame. This pleased the Lord, and the Lord gave him wisdom. That's what he asked for, wisdom to lead God's people. That wisdom with people was illustrated when the two mothers came to King Solomon, the new king of Israel, and claimed the same baby. And Solomon said, bring me a sword, I'll divide the baby. I'll give half to one mother, half to the other. The true mother, of course, spoke up and said, please do not kill my baby. And Solomon said, that is the true mother. And his wisdom, the reputation of his wisdom just spread. And then God gave him wisdom on his job as king. He was an incredible organizer, administrator. This is when he writes Proverbs. He is older now, he is wiser now, and in Proverbs he exhorts diligence, hard work, and he condemns laziness. Solomon was a hard worker. And we also see his wisdom that God gave him in building the temple. 50% of Solomon's biography pertains to the temple. Solomon was sincere. He wanted to worship the Lord. This took 7 years. It took 200,000 workers. The entire Mount Moriah complex, which included the temple and a house for Pharaoh's daughter, etc. In today's money, would have cost $8 billion. Then we begin to see the decline of Solomon. He disobeyed this great command that God gave to Moses, knowing that the monarchy was coming, the kings were coming. And in that description for the coming kings, they were not to multiply wealth, they were not to multiply the military, they were not to multiply their wives. Solomon violated all three of these qualifications of the king. He multiplied wealth. He became the wealthiest man on the planet. He multiplied his military when he multiplied horses and chariots. The king was to depend on the Lord, not his military. And then Solomon multiplied wives. And then this was his downfall, because the wives brought with them their religion, their false religion and their false gods. He became unequally yoked together with unbelievers. And then there's Solomon's repentance that is expressed in Ecclesiastes, the last book that Solomon wrote as an old man shortly before he died. In Ecclesiastes 2:17, he looks back on his life and he says, I hated life. I hated this 20 years of my life where I lived in disobedience. And he says to those young upcoming potential leaders in Ecclesiastes 12:1, remember now your Creator in the days of your youth. So we see the rise and the fall of Solomon. That's the background of Solomon for the books that he wrote. And it's helpful to know the author when we begin to study the book that he wrote.